Well, if I told you that millions of people have been killed by this process, I would not be exaggerating, because it's true. You can have the greatest innovation in the world. Lots of people did not benefit. It's FDA, go to hell. We're ramming this through, and you're not going to stop us. The National Football League, they adopted concussion-proof helmets. What happened to concussions? They went up.
My voice in today's episode is powered by 11 Labs. Today's guest has spent 60 years proving something most people find deeply uncomfortable, that when government tries to protect you, it often doesn't. Sam Peltzman is one of the most cited economists alive. His name is literally attached to an effect, the Peltzman Effect, the idea that safety regulation can cause people to take more risks, potentially canceling out the very protection it promised. Seatbelts, drug approvals, highway standards. He looked at all of it and asked the question nobody wanted to ask. What I want to find out today is what it costs a person to spend a lifetime inside that tension, what you carry, what still troubles you, what endures. Let's get into it.
Okay, well, that's a terrific question. If I had to give a single answer, it would be the drug approval process. It's about the only thing I've studied that really gets my juices flowing. And lately it's gotten worse, which is even more teeth rattling. So if I had to pick one, it would be that.
You grew up watching government expand after the New Deal. At what point did you stop trusting the stated reason for a policy and start asking who actually benefits, and what broke that trust open?
I don't trust anybody, including you or even me sometimes. Facts. The drug business, we're talking about the introduction of new drugs and the process by which new drugs get approved for sale in the market. I was asked to take a look at it, and I didn't know too much about it. I mean, one of the nice things about this 60 years is you learn a little bit about a lot of things. And in this case, I learned how the process worked. And I worked out a way of, let's weigh the costs against the benefits. And the facts were so clear, to me anyway, that that's, if I had any preconceptions, they got jolted by the facts, and they haven't changed. They've only reinforced that insight or that set of facts which I was assembling. Now, what is it now? 50 plus years ago.
Was there something you found that was like most shocking that you think somebody like myself, who's totally uninformed, would be, just, I don't know, awestruck by it?
Well, if I told you that millions of people have been killed by this process, I would not be exaggerating, because it's true. And I could walk you through the facts, but basically it comes from a couple of things in the process. To get a new drug approved, you're looking at now it's in the billions of dollars, and it's going to take 10 years. Okay, the billions of dollars discourages innovation. I mean, the whole game in the drug industry today is, if you have a good idea, at some point you're going to sell out to Merck and Pfizer and so on, and the bigger players, solely because they're the only ones who can push you through this regulatory maze. So you're discouraging innovation at the front end. Somebody, some group has got to be able to think in terms of billions of dollars before you have something that can be marketed. The second is that it takes 10 to 15 years. That's the biggie. You can have the greatest innovation in the world. And if it comes on the market, saving lives, making people's lives better, if it comes on the market in 10 years instead of 5 years, what's happened in those extra 5 years? Lots of people did not benefit. That's where my statement that this process has killed millions comes from. That extra time, extra expense, it was illustrated for me very. Look at the experience in COVID. Whatever one thinks about the current administration, it had one great accomplishment. It got a vaccine on the market within a year. Do you know how astounding that is? In fact, it didn't get on the market. There was an emergency use authorization. You know what an emergency use authorization is? It's FDA, go to hell. We're ramming this through, and you're not going to stop us. And it was a great accomplishment.
Using as an example, like now with all, there seems to be a lot of stuff. Like I'm certainly not anti-vax. Vaccines are like one of the best medical inventions of all time.
Well, who decides that?
Specific to the COVID vaccine, don't you think, knowing what we know now, a lot of people shouldn't have gotten it that did get it?
That's inevitable in life. You have to proceed with the information you have. And the current process is one in which the information comes from a randomized control trial, which in this case was huge. They sped it up enormously and made it bigger at the front end to get the information more quickly. But it was 10,000 max. Stuff that happens to 1 in a million is not going to be detected by a sample of 10,000. It's going to require you to take a chance and put it out there. And if the FDA were doing the job that it really is equipped to do, it would be monitoring what happens in the market and collecting the information and proceeding from that point. The direct answer to your question is no, because the effects that have turned up are so rare that it would not alter the cost-benefit calculation of should I take the vaccine or not. Now, having said that, if you don't want to take the vaccine, that's fine with me. But I do. And who's going to make that decision? In this case, the decision was made to put it out there much quicker than it would have been in the case of a typical drug approval process. It even took a couple of years before the emergency use authorization was converted into general marketing approval.
And your point is we have the capabilities and we have the ideas and we have the science to do it, so we should be doing it more. And if it's a 1 in a million chance, the 999,999 people it helps is worth the one.
It's costs and benefits. That's not true in every case. There could be cases where a 1 in a million risk isn't worth it. But you're never going to know unless it's out there. And the gist of my work in this area is that the things it's data, it's facts. It's not ideology or theory or anything like that. In the run of cases where you're taking those extra 5 years to do your randomized trials and the back and forth that goes on, even after the last randomized control trial, you're looking at 2 years. That delay costs lives. It also catches a few things, not everything, not the 1 in a million, but it does catch the 2 or 3 in 10,000 kind of risk. Okay. By and large, that benefit is this big compared to the cost of delaying stuff on that gets to the market and is useful. And that's happened over and over, and there's a perfectly good reason for that, or set of reasons for that. But it's not going to change. It's not going to change in any fundamental way. Not in my lifetime. I hope in yours.
Yeah, we have a personal, obviously a personal connection to this with medicines with ALS and ALS patients. The window's so short that if you're going to take 5 to 10 years, a lot of people who have ALS get diagnosed with ALS pass away in the first 5 years. So it's
Yes,
just not
yes.
fast enough.
Yeah, that's a very typical case. What are they looking for in those 5 years?
We'll see if Troy and I can earn that trust before today is over. George Stigler gave you the intellectual framework that regulation serves producers, not the public. But a framework isn't a conviction. What did you have to give up, personally or intellectually, to fully commit to that view when it was still genuinely dangerous to say out loud?
Okay, first of all, I don't have that view. And secondly, it was George who came around and not me. We had a little argument about what you said about the regulation exclusively serving the interest of the sellers and not the buyers. And he eventually came around to my view, which is that the regulators serve any group that can organize and bring some political pressure, and it moves things around in predictable kind of ways between those groups. That's where I'm coming from. And again, I got there by looking at what actually were the effects of regulation. How did they change from one time to the next, and so on and so forth? Not from any preconceived notion of what regulation should or shouldn't do, which I mean, I have those notions, but that's not the same as what it actually does, which is really what I should be back then I was telling myself, that's what you should be looking at. What actually happens? And that comes from Stigler. You're right. I see you've been on you've been doing some research into my history here, and George was a great figure in my life, but he wasn't right about everything. That was part of his great ability to teach. It was the questions he asked. I can remember back when I was actually his student as a graduate student. At that point, he hadn't come to the belief that regulation serves the producer's interest. He thought regulation doesn't have any effect that matters at all because market forces will overcome it and so on and so forth. So he had me, I was doing some research on regulation and banking, and I came to him and I said, I have this results. Regulation is extremely important in the banking industry, and I can show you how it's affected the whole process of starting new banks and expanding banks. And he took one look at it and he said, well, come back in 6 months with the right answer. It was a joke. He eventually gave in and he said, yes, this is an exception. And he let me go. And then he changed his own mind 3 or 4 years later.
Your entire career is built on showing that what protection promises and what it delivers are different things. When did you first feel that in your own life? Not as a theorem, but as something that cost you something.
That's you're putting me on the spot here. Uh, Maybe my first car accident. I don't. It's tough. That's too hard for somebody my age to go back and say, when did you first encounter it in your life? I'm much more interested in when other people have encountered it in their life.
Chicago in the 1960s and 70s was a war of ideas, and the Chicago school was the insurgency. What does it feel like now that the insurgency won, and do you recognize what it's become?
Well, I wouldn't say the insurgency is one. I think as they say in the menswear business, what goes around comes around, and there are cycles, and there are Chicago itself. You're right. It was the insurgency. The profession, when I came when I came to Chicago as a graduate student, the profession as a whole was very interventionist, very skeptical about market forces, and very, in the area that I ended up specializing in, very supportive of government intervention of many kinds. And we were the insurgency, it's true, and we had some success, I would say that. Now, as far as the Chicago school itself, basically it's died out, doesn't exist anymore. And that's already, you're talking 25 or 30 years. There is no Chicago school. At Chicago, for example, it's the Chicago economics department now is pretty much, it's a very good department, but it's not it's not an insurgent in any sense. It's an ordinary good economics department. That said, there are a few old timers like me still hanging around that might, that we're left behind. But it's not. There is no. The profession itself has changed enormously. It's become much more technocratic, and in terms of policy, but probably that's related. Again, it's much more interventionist than it used to be. So when you say the insurgency won, it was maybe for a while, and now we're back again. And if I have one regret, it's that that no one has a historical sense. The insight that regulation will work to serve interest groups and not necessarily the broad public with totally uninterested, totally not unself-interested actors doing the common good. It's back full force. That's a big regret. You can't. Certainly, I was unsuccessful in changing that permanently. I may have thrown a few a little sand in the gears, but that's about it.
So, what would it look like if the insurgency won? What would that look like to you?
It would be a permanent skepticism about what my dear late colleague Harold Demsetz called the nirvana fallacy, which is to compare the messy real world that we've been discussing, where there are costs, there are benefits, some things work, some things don't work, and you have to strike a balance against an ideal. Milton Friedman used to call it letting the best be the enemy of the good. And that's where we are now. People are now, again, just as they were when I was a student, content to say, oh, isn't this terrible? The government should fix it. And if the government tries to fix it, the people who run the government will try to fix it. Period. End of story. In that battle needs to be started again. That nirvana, the nirvana story is not the one you're going to get if you trust people who are not angels and are self-interested and are dealing with an uncertain, messy world. You have to strike a balance. There's market failure and there's government failure. Which is going to be the one that predominates? In many of these cases, it's going to be the latter.
You've spent 6 decades in one institution. Most people treat that as loyalty. I want to ask whether staying was ever a form of intellectual shelter, and whether that shelter had a price.
It's not true. I've been elsewhere. I even worked for the government for a year. I was a bureaucrat for a year, and I learned a lot. I also was. I spent about a decade at different universities, so I haven't been here for 60 years, but 50, yeah, that's a long time. Am I particularly loyal? No. I think the Chicago of my youth was of a time and a place. And the Chicago of today is different. Is it better or worse? I'm not willing to make judgments. It's different. Would I even, if I could possibly do it, live my life over the same way? I don't know. It's not clear I would become an academic economist if I had to make the decision at a, as a graduate student, a new graduate student today. So, no, I don't have any great nostalgia or even great regrets. The world moves on.
Your 1975 paper implies that federal safety mandates shifted deaths from car occupants onto pedestrians and cyclists. If that finding is right, there are specific people who died on specific roads because regulators gave drivers a false sense of security. Do you feel any accountability for having named that mechanism? or does the economist's job end at the description?
Well, it's not that cut and dried. First of all, I didn't name it. So other people did. They called it the Peltzman Effect. I was taken aback when I first heard about the Peltzman Effect, but I'll take it. I mean, as long as they spell my name right, why should I argue with naming it that? Uh, when you say certain specific people, you don't know who they are, which is one of the problems with these kind of. It's one of the things that affect the incentives of regulators and people who deal with them. The people who died because of the offsetting behavior are not identifiable. They're just people who died in an accident. Nor sometimes the people who didn't die because they were belted in are also identifiable, but with a big margin of uncertainty. That is to say, you can have a certain kind of accident which is fatal 50% of the time, and you notice that 75% of the people who are belted or survive the accident. Some of that group is benefiting from this. So it's very hard to really identify particular individuals. And my role is not simply to say, well, here are the facts, and it's also to say, think ahead to the next time. The next time you come to a similar situation, and think through the costs and benefits, and include in your thinking that there will be an offsetting effect if we're talking about safety. And I would be blowing into the wind if it weren't true. But it is. And I think as I said, I'll take it if you want to name it after me. The reason it's still around, and you can see I'm pretty old now, but the reason it's been around for all these years is that it works in many contexts. So I just got the latest one. Somebody sent it to me, not the author, somebody else. The National Football League went, they got concerned about concussions. They still are. So they adopted concussion-proof helmets. The things that they wear now are designed to prevent or reduce concussions. There's an article in the Southern Economic Journal that somebody sent me, which is a very good, it's a professionally very polished piece of work. And it shows pretty conclusively what happened to concussions as a result of that innovation. They went up. They actually went up, which is going well beyond your initial description of the car seat study, the safety belt study, which is that the offsetting effect was complete. This is more than complete, which you can't rule out. You can't rule out any of the logical possibilities. You could have offsetting behavior that doesn't completely offset. You could have it where it's a wash, and you could have it, as in this case, where it actually increases concussions. And that kind of finding is, I wouldn't say it's universal. There are cases where people look for it and don't find it, but you see it more often than not, which in the world that we live in, one of uncertainty and lots of other things affecting outcomes, is a considerable achievement. It's lasted 75, 51 years. People are still looking for it and still finding it in many different contexts.
So when you find a I guess glitch, almost like glitch like that, where the regulation is supposed to cause X and in fact is not, or it's going the opposite way, do you then, in your role, do you then try to propose solutions, or you're just pointing out the
No,
holes?
absolutely not. I don't think economists really are in their best habitat when they start telling people what to do, including the people who make policy. But they should be perhaps uh, doing more to inform and make sure that whoever is making policy is doing it with the information that they've generated. I don't think I've never been bashful about discussing automobile safety with a non-academic audience. I've never taken the view, which is I'm an academic. Let me do my work, and I'm not going to engage with the rest of the world. But I don't think I benefit myself or the rest of the world by telling it what to do, except with drug regulation. Speed it up. As I said, that's the one thing that does get my juices going. We're talking about life and death. At that point, I begin to be less reticent about pushing in a certain direction.
The drug amendments paper argues that delayed approvals cost more lives than bad drugs. That means identifiable people died waiting. You've never, in anything I've read, named that cost emotionally, only statistically. Why?
Well, I have a certain amount of emotion about it, as you can see, but why should you be interested in my feelings? I don't have any particular uh, advantage over anybody in airing my feelings. And I think that's uh, what 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 tends to happen is that we have this uh, we have this world where if you shout louder or you unburden yourself, that's somehow become a virtue. Not I just don't see the world that way. Uh, as I said, why are my feelings better than yours? They're not. They're not. They shouldn't be.
When the public health establishment pushed back hard on the Peltzman Effect, the instinct in that situation is to either capitulate or dig in. You didn't fully do either. What was actually happening inside that controversy for you, not methodologically, but personally?
I have a very thick skin. It just doesn't. It rolls right off my back. Uh, uh, More with the drug paper than with the auto safety paper. You're right. What the auto safety establishment did was dig in for a long time. They're still pretty much dug in because they're run by they're run by engineers who think, they're trained to come up with engineering solutions to these problems. It's perfectly understandable. But the drug uh, uh, paper was really attacked in ways that are scurrilous, actually, underhanded and I didn't care. And if I did, it would be a waste of time. As I said, I'm not bashful about getting out there and putting my stuff out for criticism. And as I said, if you spell my name right, I don't care what you can dump all over me, you can praise me, and I've had both. I don't think I'd be here if I dwelled on such things a lot.
You're kind of finding places where there's this issue, where there's this error, whatever the field. Obviously, you're more passionate about some than others. But then, is there any part of you though that you like want to see? Don't you want to see that next step, or you just want to point out that there's an issue so they think about it in the future?
Yeah, do I want to see a particular world? Yes, I have my own nirvana, but I'm not living in it. And the odds are very, very low that I'll last long enough to get there with you if it actually moves in that direction. So I think the major problem that the major issues that would consume me is how do we make the world a little better, and what can I offer you that will help you get there? And it's economic analysis. It's not emotion. It's not shouting. It's not in my case certainly political organizing. I've never, while I was a bureaucrat and a politician for a year, I never thought of myself in that context. Even though I'm a nice guy, I can glad hand with the best of them, and it's just not my world, and it's not going to be. I mean, we're pretty late in the game.
Your model of regulation says it's always an equilibrium of interest group pressure. That framework has no room for a policy that is simply right. Does that ever feel like a trap you've built for yourself? A worldview so internally consistent it can no longer be surprised?
No, the answer is very simple. No, that's the way the world is, and I got some mileage out of understanding that uh, that equilibrium that you described changes, and regulation changes with it. And would I prefer a world with less regulation? Yes, I would. But it's not the world that I'm living in, and I have some kind of ability to analyze the world that I'm living in, and so I'll continue to do it. Continue. So I have continued to do it throughout my professional career and even after.
Stigler captured regulators. Peltzman generalized the model. Becker tested it. It became a tradition. At what point does a tradition of skepticism about power become its own form of orthodoxy? And are you inside that orthodoxy now?
Okay, so the history is that I would say that the kind of work that you just summarized became a widely accepted view about regulation within the economics profession for a while, but it wasn't pursued. Uh, uh, and I think that fact is a loss to the profession. The profession went in a different direction, became much more technocratic. It became much more, let's look at case by case with the biggest set of, with the most powerful set of computational and uh, uh, similar resources that we can throw at this particular issue and forget about the general questions. So the one thing that cuts through the three people that you mentioned, myself, Stigler, and Becker, was we were looking for some broad general view that could encompass all kinds of regulation. The need for that seems to have disappeared, and it's had a very baleful effect on the connection between economics and the world. The world can tune out economics completely now and not miss a thing. That was not true in the 70s and 80s because economics was capable of saying, look, this thing that you want to do is part of a broad system that works in the following way. You think you're going to pass the Dodd-Frank Act and it's going to eliminate bank collapses. The Dodd-Frank Act is part of a process which has the following kind of general effects, which you should expect. It's a good example of the Peltzman effect. People will react in ways that will offset this thing that you think you're passing the act for. And that's very similar to auto regulation, which is also similar to so on and so forth. The ability to do that has gone out of economics completely, to the point where you can do this very fine piece of work, which the rest of the world can take or leave, and it doesn't speak to any other more general kind of question. I think that if I had to date it, I would say in the 1990s that left the field. And it's going to take. I don't think that economics can sustain itself by simply becoming very inward looking and technical and doing one little, taking one problem in isolation, looking at it, moving on to the next problem, and so on. Now, I have one professional responsibility which I still discharge, which is I'm a journal editor. So in many ways, you can blame me because I am enforcing this new orthodoxy on a daily basis. It's very important to get things right, to use the correct techniques, and so on and so forth. But it's not the end of the story. And I think the last frontier is going to be a revival of a connection between economics and policy, which is going to go through. Maybe it's going to be new developments. Maybe it's going to be Back to the Future. Maybe it's I don't know, but there's going to have to be a greater concern about. Okay, so you've done this great thing. What does it actually mean for the world? And in my area, the world of economic policy.
So what do you think happened in the 90s that made people stop listening?
I don't know. I really don't know. I can point to a couple of things. And the one that I did forecast was there's been a huge revival of empirical research, which was put in the background. We went through in my part of the profession a romance with economic theory, where we thought we could solve a lot of problems from first principles, and I was skeptical about that. but what we started getting was, first of all, the money tree started shedding leaves. A lot of money was put into economic research. We got enormous improvements in computation power, in the power to deal with very large sets of data, and then subsequently the power and the resources to do experiments, to do our version of a randomized control trial. They're very expensive. You got to get thousands of subjects. You've got to organize the collection of data. You've got to have treatment groups, control groups, and all the rest of it. But the ability to do that exploded in the 90s, and especially more recently in the 2000s. Uh, 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 and now it continues. We now have a big upsurge in textual analysis because you have these text crawling programs which can distill enormous amounts of oral expression and summarize it for you in any way that you like. So I think there was a big technological change that was very attractive to people in the profession. The other thing that I would say is that uh, uh, economics has always been, for the people in it, for the majority of people in it, a clash of the head and the heart. The people who are in it as academic researchers are, in the first place, academics. And their instincts are all, yes, nirvana, yes, change the world for the better. And they lean interventionist. They did in my youth. They did throughout the revolution, the counter revolution, or whatever you want to call it, however it was described before the 70s, 80s, early 90s, maybe. And they do now. And uh, it's the head that's telling you, just wait a minute. You got to look at the facts in a dispassionate way. There are always going to be benefits, but always costs. You got to weigh one against the other, and they still give lip service to that. But when you're doing it on a case by case kind of basis, you can give lip service and just move on to the next case, and not worry about generalizing. And the as that kind of mentality sets in, it affects the career concerns of people. As I said, I'm a journal editor who's enforcing an orthodoxy that I have very strong misgivings about. But you can't fight City Hall, you know. I always tell young people, if you're frustrated, if you're concerned about the same things I might have been concerned with 40 or 50 years ago, and you're frustrated by the inability to actualize them, that's not your fight. Your fight is to to do whatever it takes to get you where you're going to want to go in life, and you're not gonna get there by trying to fight the orthodoxy. That's unfortunate, but it's true. So the the career incentives just reinforce all of this. It's going to take some kind of change, and I can only guess at what it might be, which is gonna bring us around to something that's more relevant to policy and the way the world actually works as a general system rather than particular cases.
You've argued that voters are fiscal conservatives. They punish spending. Yet the data on government growth suggests they keep electing people who spend. Either the voters are irrational, or your model is incomplete, or both. Which is it, honestly?
Maybe a little of everything. You're right. It's remarkable how much research you've done into my wayward paths, but the evidence as of now, we're talking 30 years ago, so it's always subject to revision. The evidence is that voters tended to punish spending and reward the opposite. Uh, uh, that could still be true, and there's a connect. You have to make another connection, which is between the voters and their as principals and their political agents, who also face a trade-off. So suppose I'm a governor, and I want to have a huge stadium built with a statue of me in the front, and my name on the and I say, all you folks in the legislature, you're voting for this stadium, and if you don't, the following bad things are going to happen, and they're going to happen to me too, because I'm going to lose the next election. Well, that's the trade-off. I get immortality and a gold statue, and I lose the election. I don't know, is that good or bad? So it's not simply, you can't simply say the facts are that voters punish spending. And I did research subsequent to that, which reinforces that view. And it also shows that there are cycles. This doesn't sit well with the hyper rational view of many of my fellow economists. But what tends to happen is they actually do lose elections to people who then cut the spending. And then it drifts around, and somebody else comes in and does the same thing all over again. Namely, they increase spending, they pay the price, the next party cleans up the mess, and then the mess returns, and so on and so forth. It's not that that view is empirically wrong. It's that there are other things. Now, why does somebody, lose the election? Well, it could be this. They have this thing that they want to do, or that their faction wants to do, and they're willing to pay the price. Every election, the modern elections are 50-50 practically, and the 51% side wants to do certain things, 49% side doesn't want them to do things. And the things that the 51% side do need only move 2 people out of every 100 to lose the next election. So, do you, in the time that you have, do the things that you want to do and run that risk? Why not? There's no way I can tell you what the right trade-off is in that dimension.
It seems like though it keeps falling uphill, where they say everyone says they're going to fix it, and then
Yeah.
spending goes up, and the next group's going to fix it, and spending goes up.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, it doesn't always. It's not true. There was a long period uh, from, I'd say, roughly 1980 to the financial crisis. That's what, 30 plus years in which government didn't grow very much, measured by budgets and spending and that kind of thing. It didn't grow at all as a fraction of the economy. It grew with the economy. Now you had things pushing that, the peace dividend and so on and so forth. But it's a worldwide phenomenon across the developed world. Government was pretty flat for about 30 years. Then the financial crisis came, and there was an immediate upward ratchet, and it hasn't come back down. So these things are not really. It's not a smooth upward trajectory and it's not going to be going forward. I mean, that much we can see pretty much. Again, whether I live to see that or not, there's going to be some kind of fiscal rearrangement in the next decade, I would say, and who knows where that's going to take us.
The Peltzman Effect has been used by people who oppose safety regulation entirely, used as a license, not a caution. When a rigorous idea gets weaponized beyond its evidence base, what is the obligation of the person who generated it?
Well, what you're describing is a misuse of the facts that underlie the Peltzman Effect, and I can't do anything about that. The correct statement is that safety regulation has a direct effect and also an indirect effect. And if you do not take into account either one, you're misusing the concept. Now, I've never been aware of what you described, which is people using the Peltzman Effect to oppose any kind of. Do they oppose voluntary purchases of safety devices? The people that you described. I mean, are they just pro risk? I don't know. I don't understand. I don't understand where they're coming from. You could take a principled stand on who should be the one who decides whether we should have safety devices, and that leads into questions of who does the decision maker affect? Do they affect other people or just themselves? But I don't think it would be the correct use of what I understand as the Peltzman Effect to oppose any regulation at any time under any circumstances that has an indirect offsetting effect.
So obviously you're pretty anti-regulation and for a good reason, not for no reason at all. Is there any part of the data that suggests, like in certain fields or certain areas, regulation is effective or is more effective than not?
I would say more broadly, government government intervention rather than regulation. I think when we discuss the Food and Drug Administration, I just mentioned in passing data collection. I think government has a comparative advantage in that field because private actors have their own incentives. So I would not oppose a regulation that said, at least on principle. I mean, again, there's costs, benefits, and you have to be careful about how it's structured. But which said we have this reporting mechanism, and every time there's an adverse event, it needs to be reported to this particular government agency, not held privately for possible investigation later, and we're going to periodically publish the results of this data gathering. That's where government has an advantage because even up with interest group competition, there will be competing interests focused on that process where there wouldn't be in a purely private system. In a purely private system, the one who is most likely to learn about the adverse event would be the drug seller. The drug seller has a cost benefit calculation, which is maybe different, depends on the legal system and how the legal liability system works and how costly it is to access. It's a lot of complicated issues, but it's not clear that the private incentives would serve as well as if we had a government regulator. So I would be open to that kind of regulation. And there could be others. I mean, I'm not willing to take the movement libertarian kind of line that says there's a market solution for everything and it's always going to be better than a government solution. I think you can have certain presumptions about these issues, but mine would admit that there's an area that, at least in principle, you would want to entertain all of the possibility of government failure, but it's worth thinking about running that risk.
Has faith ever played a role in your life? And if not, what is it that keeps you from despair when your life's work is essentially documenting how institutions fail people?
That's a very that's a personal question. I don't want to get into that that part of my life, but I'm not cut off from religion and faith. Did it ever play an overt role in my professional life? I can't really say that it has. I deeply respect people for whom that is not true. I like to be an optimist about things that don't work right will correct themselves in this world, if not in the hereafter. So I try not to despair. I must say it's the as you get near the end, it gets harder not to. But I try to be an optimist. It sometimes is trying to be an optimist. I'll grant you that.
Toward a More General Theory of Regulation has nearly 10,000 citations. At that level of influence, you're not just describing the regulatory landscape, you're shaping how an entire generation of economists, lawyers, and judges think about it. Has that scale of influence ever felt dangerous to you?
No, not sure I ever realized that I had. That's kind of maybe I wish were true. No, the answer is no for lots of reasons. One being skepticism about how. I will say that if you're taking a course in regulation today, and somebody who's teaching it feels that they need to talk about general theories of regulation, I do realize that that article will be on the reading list. Good. I probably would write it differently today so that it was more accessible to more people. But I have never felt any. Why should I feel regrettable? If I don't have a burden, you have to use it in a way that fits your needs, not mine. I wish it had more influence. Now that you mentioned it, if I think about it, you could do worse.
If a student came to you today and said, I want to use your framework to argue against a specific safety regulation, what would you tell them they need to prove before they're entitled to make that argument?
Well, that would, again, I was talking about specific case. Unfortunately, that would depend on the specific case. You can't, first of all, I would discourage that attitude. I would say, don't go into this thinking you're going to prove this or that. That's the first thing I would say. Secondly, think through what we call the counterfactual, right? What would have to be true if your view of the situation is correct compared to somebody else's view? And then think about the facts that would distinguish the one from the other. That's an old kind of piece of advice that I would give to anybody who's serious about these kind of questions. And the one reason I'm a journal editor at this advanced stage is that I am gratified when I can give that advice to a young person and it actually affects the research that they do in a positive direction. So I am doing that all the time, and it's a lot of fun actually. That's why I keep doing it. I don't have to be an editor of a journal for any other reason.
You've edited the Journal of Law and Economics for decades. Editors don't just publish ideas, they shape which questions get asked. Looking back at what you let through and what you didn't, where do you think the field got narrowed in ways it shouldn't have been?
I'm not saying it should not. Again, I have to emphasize this. The field is different. Is it better? Yes, in certain respects. No, in other respects. The stuff that I got away with as a young economist in terms of the quality of the empirical work, I could never get away with today. And that's good. I mean, we should do it right rather than, just wave our hands at problems. We didn't realize what the problems were in my misspent youth. We didn't fully have the ability to do anything with problems that we could perhaps intuit. So I, if I despair about anything, it's not about the fact that economics is different than it used to be. I am not nostalgic. I'm not calling for a counter revolution or go back to the good old days of my youth and have the same fights that I had and so on and so forth. Uh, uh, my my belief is these things are cyclical. Sometime in the sometime in the future, concerns that are not front burner today will be, and will be in a different place. Different, not better. I hope it's better in some, at least in some respects.
Is there anything you said in some ways it's better, in some ways it's worse? What are the ways that it's worse today compared to what it
The way
was?
that it's worse, I think we've been over this, is that general questions aren't being asked, right? So I'll
It's
give
too,
you
it's too
I'll
specific,
give
it's
you
too niche.
no, I'll give you an example. So we have the ability to do randomized controlled trials within economics, often very lavishly funded. So I'll tell you the one example: crime. Right, so police departments all over the country have been money has been rained on them to do these trials. How should we deal with crime? All right, there's not by now 100 experiments that they've done, flooding crime areas, not flooding crime areas, whatever. You just each one of these was a separate project funded by somebody, enlisting lots of researchers, lots of computational power. If you asked, as you should, what is different about police departments who did these experiments, got the results, compared to others who didn't? What's changed? What's changed in the world? There's no one asking that question. That's that's missing. That's missing. It's all well and good to say, I did the experiment, I got this clean result. But then when you ask, well, did that police department change? And they say no. You got to ask a question. Why not? And the answer, I think, is going to come from the part of economics that I grew up with. It's a public choice kind of answer. Why should the police department change the way it's working because of experimental evidence that it would lower the crime rate? It doesn't inevitably follow that the police department's objective function, as we call it, has only one thing, which is reducing crime. That's what the young folks today are missing, the public choice element. And I think it's going to have to come back. Uh, Not because I say so, but because the world is eventually going to wake up and say, well, why are we spending all of this money on your cute experiments when it's not affecting anything? Or let's put it a little bit more objectively. Somebody out there is going to make a name for themselves by actually doing what I just described, putting together all the experimental evidence on some problem, whether it's crime or hunger, whatever, and asking the question, what do two questions. What does this corpus of separate experiments, how does it, what kind of general results did it get? And the second question, how did it affect the practice of the actors who you're studying? Uh, so that's missing now, and it you know, maybe I'm too optimistic, but someday, not too far in the future, those questions are going to be asked.
You've spent your career demonstrating that good intentions produce bad outcomes. That is structurally a pessimist's project. What do you actually believe about whether humans can design institutions that work, not in theory, but in practice, given everything you know?
Okay, so that's of course an enormously important question, the question of institutional design, and uh, I've come to believe that you have one shot, and just one, which is at the institutional design stage. Uh, you that it is possible, and I mean in this world, and with all the political uh, pressures here and there, it is possible at the initial design stage to bring something off that will have long lasting, better effects than another approach. So I think you have a politically relevant choice at the beginning. I mentioned the Dodd-Frank Act. Had you come into that period, there was a financial crisis. Something was going to be done. Everybody understood that. Okay. The question is what was going to be done. You had two ways to go. Okay. One was to design institutions, different institutions, to cope with the basic set of issues. The other was to double down on the previous way of dealing with similar issues. We decided to do the latter. Okay, now in some ways it's succeeded, in other ways it has not. Clearly, we haven't done away with financial crises. We had massive bailouts just a couple of years ago. Uh, 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 we're facing another issue with private credit now, which if it gets out of hand, there'll be another financial meltdown. Well, clearly, that hasn't worked. Would the other approach have worked? Maybe, I don't know, but I would have been pushing. I was when people asked me. I said, "No, you have to go into. You will never uh, 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 by by uh, clamping down from the top. You're not going to eliminate the incentive to offset the safety that you're trying to impose by pressing down from the top. Somehow that incentive is going to come out, and it's going to come out in ways you can't predict. You have to attenuate the incentive. Well, it didn't go that way, and we live with the consequence. But I think you have a shot. I think you have a shot. Uh, uh, Typically, in a crisis, uh, 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 and and typically for a very short period of time. I think a lot of the deregulation, for example, that happened in the 1970s. It's no accident that it happened in the 1970s when you had stagflation and an economy that was really showing some signs of pressure, and in particular in industries that had to be reformed some way or another. You had this brief window, and we made some choices, and I would say probably for the better in that case, that we made the deregulatory choice instead of the other choice, which is to double down on the previous system. Well, we did that in the case of the passenger railroad part of the industry. We doubled down, and you'll never get any meaningful passenger rail service in this country that way. We went in a completely different direction in freight, and the industry is thriving on that side. So it is mixed, but I think the answer is design the right institutions, and you don't have much time to do it up front. And if you miss that opportunity, it's lost. You can't do it. You can't recover it except in another crisis.
Tell me about your family. Brag about them. What have they built? Who have they become? And what do you see in them that has nothing to do with any of this?
My family is still growing, believe it or not. I just acquired a fourth grandson. I never thought I'd live long enough to see that, but I have, and that's incredibly gratifying that I've been able to do that. I started my family late in life. You want one regret, which I would communicate to the young people, is don't do it the way I did it, which is sacrifice your youth to your career. You shouldn't do that. If I had to live my life over, I wouldn't do that. But you only know that when you're too old. So here I am in my mid-80s, still having grandchildren. The latest one is a month old.
Congrats, that's awesome.
It is. It is in its own way quite awesome to see that happening.
Now on to our final word segment, where we ask our guests a few rapid fire questions. What was the happiest moment in your life?
Well, early on, the Brooklyn Dodgers winning the World Series in 1955. I'm old enough to remember that.
That's a good one. We've never heard that one before.
No, well, you come to my office, you'll see a reproduction of the New York Daily News from that day.
That's hilarious.
So that's early on. There have been others. I mean, the Mets in 1969, for one.
What is the biggest adversity you've faced?
You talk about drug regulation. I nearly killed myself twice with aspirin, basically, until they discovered a drug that could cure ulcers. I had two quite life-threatening internal bleeding episodes, which got me this close. So, what's your next question? I'm still here.
What are you most excited about?
Personal is too late to get excited, and as I said, professionally, we're at a crossroads, and I don't know which way it's going. I think the world will have a great future, but it's going to be bumpy.
What advice would you give your younger self?
Do your own thing, and do it fast. Do it sooner rather than later.
Do you have any book recommendations for us or for the listeners?
Adam Smith, an inquiry into the nature and causes of the wealth of nations. Just passed its 250th birthday. Well worth picking up for the first time for all of you.
The name of our podcast is Nothing Left Unsaid. Do you have anything you want to say?
I never answer that. I never answer it. Period. I don't. I answer specific questions.
All right, well, here, I'll give you a specific last one. This is how we met you at the end of every one of our episodes. We ask our guests if they recommend other people that they think we should have on and for future episodes. Do you have any people you think we should ask?
Oh, let's see who's still alive. From my, I was going to say, I'm thinking of all the people who should have won the Nobel Prize but didn't, but they're all gone except one, Arnold Harburger. See if he's still if he's still able to do this. He just passed his 100th birthday, and
Wow.
he's one of the great figures of the generation before me, actually, in economics, and he's still alive. But you want to guess who's going to be different than me
Sure.
on regulation?
Could be on anything at all.
Deirdre McCloskey. Have you had Deirdre on?
No.
Check her out. Michael Munger at Duke in the political science. Have you had Mike?
No, we'll have to reach out.
Check him out.
Yeah.
People who more substantially disagree with me. Roger Knoll, who's my age and somewhere at Stanford. Paul Joskow at MIT. They would all be great. Great time.
Those are good ones.
You can ask Paul how his father ran into me the first time. Paul's father was my statistics teacher in college.
Oh, that's funny.
So there are lots of people you could talk to.
Sam, your work forces people to confront something uncomfortable, that good intentions are not enough, and that outcomes depend on how people actually behave, not how we hope they will behave. You have given us a way to think more clearly about trade-offs, incentives, and consequences, even when the answers are not clean. Thank you for helping us see the world with more precision and for being with us today.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. This was great.